All right, welcome back to another edition here of, let's call this Gambling Chronicles. The plan is going to be to put this on YouTube, Spotify. That seems to be the biggest request that I've gotten. Obviously, there's a lot more versatility there, easier to view it either on TV or, you can shut your phone down and still have it playing, or the same thing with Spotify. You can listen to it, but for now, I'm just going to upload these to Twitter until I have some more time to really go through and get everything set up properly so I do everything correctly and I don't have to be going in, fixing this, fixing that, adjusting this. I just want to make sure it's done right, and I just don't have the time to do that right now. Kind of getting to the end of the football season here, so let's get into it here. I think the name of this is going to probably be Gambling Chronicles. This isn't going to be something where I'm giving away a lot of picks or anything like that. It's going to be more about just real stuff that I've been through, or, stuff that's going on right now in the gambling industry. And maybe at some point I'll get some guests on here. I have no idea, but I'm fine with doing some solo content for now, just getting my feet wet. And, so we'll see what the future holds of this. I wasn't sure how many of these I would do. I did one last week, so I'm going to kick this one off too. Obviously, the main topic today is going to be the kid that hit the 150K parlay at a Draftkings in New Hampshire. I'll probably tie in some kiosk stories. I'm going to tie in, how I was banned from Draftkings here in New Hampshire. And I'm also going to, I have many people that have reached out to me, and I know many people personally that have had some horror stories dealing with the state of New Hampshire and, or the State Lottery Commission in the state of New Hampshire, and dealing with Draftkings. And, it's pretty much corruption. They're all in bed together, and they just make the best decisions for themselves without looking out for the consumer. And I'll lay that all out for you today. Another thing that I wanted to touch on was probably going to be appearing on Ed Feng's podcast. I think it's the Power Rank. I'll be appearing on there probably Monday, and I probably will be putting out a bunch of picks for the national championship game for player props. I know I just said that I'm not going to be giving away a lot of picks if I do this podcast specifically, but around Super Bowl time or big games where, some of these lines might sit around all the way up until kickoff. I don't feel like I'm losing much giving away some stuff there. And with that game, I have not had a losing national championship game, betting it for close to 10 years now. So I'm probably going to get crushed this week now. Honestly, at first look, I don't like what I've seen so far. We didn't like what we saw in the Final Four games, and we didn't do well in the Final Four. Elite Eight, we crushed. Final Four games weren't great for us, but we kind of had a feeling that everything didn't look great going into those games. We had plays, we had edges, but we didn't go crazy. So it's kind of good that we knew to dial it back there, and we didn't take as big of a beating as we possibly could have if we went pretty crazy. So I'm going to kick this off first with a post I made last week that it happened to go viral. I had no idea this was going to go viral when I posted it. Post I made says, "Congratulations to the kid who went into my local Draftkings and hit them for 150K same game parlays on their kiosks. Rumor is," you notice how I said rumor, because I wasn't going to put something out there that I didn't 100% know exactly what went down. But I did hear this from a couple of people, and I got a couple of conflicting stories, so I posted rumor. Rumor is they tried not to pay him, even though he didn't violate any rules. And they tried to make it seem like he was breaking some type of laws and treated him like a criminal. After a bunch of back and forth, they paid him out, barred him from all properties, nationwide for simply placing bets. Now, a lot of this is accurate. Some of this is somewhat not 100% accurate, but I'll add some context to this. And the first thing that a lot of people were saying in these comments, like this post had 820,000 views, so there's a lot of comments in here. And I tried to reply to most of them, like with, logical answers on, what I knew and why I knew and whatever. Well, the number one that kept popping up was like, how do you know? This is engagement farming. And that's 100% false. Now, the gambling community is a small community. Now, we're talking about New Hampshire here, okay? And I mean, this is a small state. Even Massachusetts, Connecticut, you combine all of these together, there's not many poker rooms. There's less than probably 10 poker rooms that are majorly operating in these areas. And rumors fly. They fly fast. You hear things. Stories just travel quick. It's not like we're talking about Vegas, Atlantic City here, where there's so many casinos and so many poker rooms. There's only Draftkings is the only outfit up here. So, me being a professional sports bettor, I feel like, I talk to enough people and I have my pulse on what is going on with like something big like this. Something big like this happens, I find out about it. Same thing like, there's a lot of things in poker. When I was playing poker, a lot of other people would not be privy to. Like I have a friend that beat a world-class poker player for $10 to $15 million playing heads up 8-game. And, nobody heard about that. I mean, I knew about that because I know the kid that beat him and I know how he beat him. And, it's just like some things you just hear about. You just know because you're kind of on the inside with other professional gamblers and you just hear things. Or just, people that work in these rooms. You might hear something from a poker room manager or, a cocktail waitress or a security guard. Word travels fast, and especially in a small state like this. So anyhow, back to this story. So he did go in there and he hit them for $150K on the same game parlays on their kiosks. And I'll add some more context to this in a minute, because I have been in contact with the guy who hit them for the $150K here, and I actually tried to get him to go on Circles Off with Pizzola and Johnny, and Rob told me he was interested. I figured that would be a great platform for him to maybe go on there if he wanted to tell this story, but he wanted to stay anonymous, and that's fine. That's his right, and let him stay anonymous. But when he does decide to do a podcast one day, from what I've spoken to him, very smart guy, and he's going to have a lot of really good stories to tell when it's his day to go on one of these podcasts. And that's a big thing as a professional gambler is, do you want to stay in the shadows or do you want to come out of the shadows? Now, I was kind of in the shadows for a while. I mean, people knew me in poker. No one really knew me in sports gambling before I went on to Circles Off, really. And, started to build up a little bit of a social media following, started posting a little bit more and, posting some of these articles. But some people just, they want to stay dark, and that's totally fine. When I started doing a little bit of this writing content, I got advised from some very successful people, like, you shouldn't do this. Like, you shouldn't be just giving away secrets and tricks. And I'm like, I think I can balance it and give some stuff away and not give away like everything, where I can, get some good engagement, maybe help some people. I've mentioned that before. I don't mind giving back because, like, a lot of people really helped me along the way from when I started with nothing in 2009 and all the way up until now. So anyhow, back to this story here. So I posted, rumor is they tried not to pay him even though he didn't violate any rules. They tried to make it seem like he was breaking some type of laws, and they treated him like a criminal. Now, he did have to wait 30 minutes to 45 minutes to get paid. Now, they went in the back room, and from what I'm told, that they were trying to find reasons not to pay him, or like why, obviously they have to pay you. But if they can come up with something that can kind of go into their terms of service where they don't have to pay you, they will 100% just won't pay you. And I'll provide some of those examples later, because I've one really big one that where they did this. Actually, I have another one. Someone else messaged me, and I have that ready to go too. So from what I'm told, they were in the back room jostling. Should we pay this? Like, what can we do? Like, did he violate anything? This, that. They went over everything with a fine-tooth comb. Finally, they emerged. They paid him, and they told him that he was not allowed to bet in the kiosks. He had to bet the counter there. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty typical. It could happen anywhere. They don't have to take your business at all for anything. They could have maybe barred him from the property, cut his limits to $1. I don't know. But they did pay him out, and he said the employees were very nice to him. But somebody did mention to him in there that he was on some type of banned list or something like that, which I'll get into that later with another story. So, I'm sure, maybe he was a little nervous. I'm on a ban list. There's something he didn't even know. He had no idea. He was potentially on a ban list. So, he maybe shaking a little bit. Am I going to get paid? Am I not going to get paid? But they paid him out. And so this brings me over to me being in contact with him to add more context to this situation. Let's see here. So let me just scroll up. It's going to be a little bouncing around in here. I have a lot of stuff in front of me here to go over, so bear with me. I'm the only one solo producing this show, so let's see here. All right, so the winnings that he had from this 150K win, roughly 150K, there were unique parlays over a bunch of different trips over the course of weeks. It wasn't just like one big slip. So I'm pretty sure on these machines you can win up to 10K per bet. So some people will go in and play these kiosks and take the angle of, I'm only going to win X amount per slip to stay under the radar. I can cash them in slowly. They'll never know who I am. They'll never give an ID. But it looks like his strategy was, I'm just going to go in here. I have an edge. I'm going to place these bets. These kiosks take these bets. And I'm just going to jam all these in. None of them were the same plays. There were different variants on different parlays. They were all slightly different variants. So he wasn't betting all the same stuff, but he changed them all up. So potentially he's heard these horror stories before where they will come out and say, well, you bet the same thing multiple times and we're not going to pay you. And that is something that Draftkings is known for. And I'm going to get into that later with some other stories. So he was betting slightly different variants. Max win 10K. And, he was winning 10K per play or whatever. So he ran it up, went back in, cashed the tickets, and that was that. That's whatever happened. So this wasn't the first time he's done this at other casinos. He's been at other casinos where they've told him, you have to come to the counter and bet. So he would go to the counter and bet. Now, I don't think he'd ever been to this casino before, so he just went in, just like you're a regular customer, If, if anyone wants to go to a grocery store and play $10,000 worth of lottery tickets, they can go in there and play $10,000 worth of lottery tickets. So, if they think they have an edge on scratching scratch tickets, go in and scratch the scratch tickets. The same thing here, okay? He thought he had an edge. Maybe he did have an edge. Went in there, placed his bets, won. let's see here. So, yeah, he'd never been, they had never specified to him this goes across all locations, this and that. And then after he cashed these in here, he had to go to another casino because he had some other bets that he had to cash in. And this casino, they paid him out, told him he was restricted to the counter, whatever. It was quick, but he said, you know, they were pretty nice too. They treated him with nothing but respect, but he's good with how they handled the situation, he said. I'm glad he got paid. But I guess there have been adjustments made in some ways or another to these kiosks where it makes certain things unavailable. You know, he probably benefited from their policies on sharps because of, you know, what happened here. So let's see. Let me just see what else is with this story here. They asked him, yeah, someone he was talking to at one of these casinos was asking him if, you know, if they'd emailed him about it or given him paperwork or whatever. No, nothing. Let me see. It's a little bit more here, and then I'm going to get on to the next subject. Oh, yeah, one guy was cool, congratulated him on finding, you know, some weak spots, but he also told him that, you know, you probably shouldn't try this at any other casinos. And like, that to me, that pisses me off when, you know, they say stuff like that, because these same game parlays are advertised all over these NBA, NFL games, all over TV, all their advertisements on the radio, everywhere. They're putting these things on fucking planes soon. They're getting a partnership with Delta, and they're going to be peddling these same game parlays down people's throats. And then you have somebody saying like, you shouldn't try this at another location. No. If you're a professional gambler, you should be going and trying to find every edge that you have and trying to exploit the casino and win. That's the goal. The goal, we're trying to win here. And it's, you know, it's the same thing like with PPH bookies, paperheads, you know, like your local bookies that, you know, rent the software from Costa Rica or whatever. Like, you're going through those guys, you're trying to win. And it's the same thing at the casino. And like, that's what I tell any paperheads that I deal with. They say, you know, I try to be right up front with them. You know, I'm going to try to win as best as I can. And that kind of gives you a leg to stand on when they come back with this, oh, you're sharp, blah, 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 and they don't want to pay you. Because at the end of the day, if they don't want to pay you, they just don't pay you. There's no regulators, no nothing like that for you to fall back on. So anyhow, let's see here. That's pretty much it, wrapping up that story. So this guy's going to make a great guest on a podcast whenever he chooses to do a podcast. Phenomenal story. There's probably a lot more to add than what I told you there, but this is just a lesson to people out there that are recreational bettors that are going into these joints playing, that when you win or show the ability that you have the ability to win, these people are they're going to cut your limits to nothing. So you could be going in there for years, losing, dumping tens, hundreds of thousands, whatever it is. It could be even smaller amounts. But the bottom line is, when you show that you have the ability to win, they're not going to be your best friends anymore. All the comps are going to stop. All the dinners are going to stop. Everything's going to stop. May go for a little while, but while you're winning. But if you learn to win, the marriage is going to break up, and they're just going to say, pretty much just say, hey, fuck you, hit the road. So keep that in mind when you're going in here. Unless you're just comfortable with taking the perks and whatever they're giving you, you're comfortable with losing. But just remember, when you learn how to win, they're gonna send you to the road, or they're gonna give you $250 limit. That's just how these places operate. Um, I had a friend who went in. I think this was in like 2022. This is a kid I grew up with locally. Again, he went in and he got crushed betting like the Kentucky Derby, and I think he was betting like NASCAR or something like that. And he lost like six figures, and they gave him everything. They're giving him the comps, the dinners, the this, the that. They gave him big limits in football, and then he absolutely crushed them during football with what I assume are probably sharp plays. And all of a sudden the marriage is over. It's like, no, well, we'll give you high limits in horse racing and NASCAR, but we're not going to give you, your limits here. So once they know you have the ability to win, you're done. So keep that in mind before you gamble here. Like I said, unless you're really comfortable with losing and just taking the perks, I just want you to know that when you learn how to win, they're not going to want you as a customer anymore. And they say we love winners, we love to pay winners. That's fucking bullshit. They do not love winners. They hate winners. If you show the ability to win long term, they will cut you off. The only winners that they love are people that win maybe one day a month. Yeah, they love those winners. They love paying them on that one day. That's it. The other 29 days, they love them because they're just dumping all their money in there. So keep that in mind. So let's see here. So get over to my story with Draftkings and how I was kicked out of there. And this was in, I believe, 2021. And this was like kind of what I consider my coming out party gambling. This was like the year I'd been waiting for since I started gambling professionally in like 2009. Like when I started in like 2009 playing poker, like making, I think the first 6 months I played poker, I made like 30,000, and that was like a total dream come true. A year prior, I was a sous chef in a kitchen. A couple of years before that, I'm in my late 20s and I'm working as like a line cook in a cafeteria. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, but like my trajectory of having a very successful career at anything was nowhere. You go back even to my early 20s, I'm working in like sub shops and stuff like that. Like, so for me to make $30,000 in 6 months, that was like that was a big deal. And I always had the dream that I was gonna run this up in poker. Maybe when it goes, I was doing well and I was on that trajectory to run it up. Black Friday came, whatever. I kept grinding. I almost busted out of poker, but my dream was always, when they, when it goes legal in the United States, when they get some legislation for, online poker to be legal in every state, the big games are going to come, and then I know how to win now, and I'm going to make $1 million or a couple $1 million, but that just never happened. Then I had the dream of Encore's opening a casino in Boston. Like there's going to be these huge games with like businessmen going in there from like the financial district in Boston, and maybe making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. Like those were like pipe dreams that never happened. So like I'm lucky that I got into the prop space when I did in 2016, and then when when Draftkings comes along, I was positioned and ready. Like at that point in time in I started going in there. I think it was 2020 actually. So 2020 I was in there right when football came back at the beginning of the pandemic, and I just basically maxed their machines what I could all the way that year, betting college football player props mainly, and the Super Bowl. And then I got banned in the fall of 2021, and I'll get into that in a second. But I went in there and this is one thing that you need to keep fresh in your mind if you're trying to run it up as a gambler and you're trying to go from here to here, okay? Like, and I knew this from poker because I never got, I started here, I might have gotten here, but I wanted to go here and I never got there. Now, if you're, kind of at the bottom of the totem pole and you have a large edge, when these windows of opportunity open, you have to take care of them. And you have to take advantage of them, not take care of them, excuse me. You have to really take advantage of the opportunity when it comes, because you don't know how long it's going to last. Now, I was kind of prepared for this. I had a couple of friends in other states that, they got their legal sports betting there, and I kind of knew what I had to do, what I didn't want to do, and how to avoid detection, all that stuff. I knew how to do that, but the most important thing was I knew I had a massive edge, and I knew that I didn't know how long the window was going to be. Like, I had no idea. Like with poker, I had 2 years there, but I got pretty good in 2009, and then 2011, the two biggest poker sites in the world get shut down. And now my ability to play these super high levels that I was on my way to getting to are gone. And it's the same thing with, when casinos open and with sports betting and stuff. Your shelf life, you don't know how long it's going to be unless you're like an originator at like these top major markets in these, the maybe 5 biggest markets, that you're kind of controlling the action, and, that's one thing. Year after year, most of those guys that when I broke in that were there then are still there now because, they just do things on the right level, and they know how to win. They adapt, they adjust. But with me, it's just prop betting. How long is this going to last? I remember around this time, a lot of people said, oh, this isn't going to last. The most successful gambler I know actually told me, like, why are you betting props? When I started betting props, he said, you're just going to get cut off. But the perfect storm happened. All these legal shops started opening, and, and I just started networking pretty hard, within people that I knew when I was growing up, and I was able to hit it hard. And then, the Draftkings thing here comes, and I was ready to go in there, and I knew this was my opportunity to get to a higher level. Like, just go in there and just see what they would give you and just go to the top. So now, when I started in there in 2020, I just went in, bet kiosks, and I would go in, just bet the kiosks, and I would go to another location that was 45 minutes away. I would start at Manchester, New Hampshire. I would bet there, then I would drive to Seabrook. And I would just jam these kiosks. Now, you couldn't bet a lot on these props in the kiosks. I could get like, I don't know, $600 to $1,000 per player at each location, which that's a decent amount, but it's not huge. Like, I would have bet more if I could have, but I couldn't. And the reason why you couldn't was because the way Canby had it set up then, and Canby was the odds provider for Draftkings at the time, they had it set up as to where once you reached a certain cap per player, you just couldn't bet the player on the machine anymore. So I'd have to go to both locations. It was a major grind. And I grinded there all fall, undetected. They never got my ID, and that was my plan. You just like, that's what oftentimes kills your longevity, is when you get either forced to the counter, or if you go to the counter and bet. So that's something that, each and every person has to decide when they go in to attack these casinos. Do I want to go to the counter? Well, if you go to the counter right away, unless you're betting at like Circa Sports, who will take anybody's action. They take on all comers. Shout out to Jeff Benson and his team there. They're awesome. They'll take whatever. But if you're going into one of these shops like Draftkings, they're not they'll cut you off pretty quick. When they realize you can win, they're gonna cut you off pretty quick. So the advice I was given was, don't give them your ID, and do whatever you can to not give an ID. Obviously, you tip when you cash out, and you just never cash out an amount that's going to trigger an ID. So I would just go in there, and I would just cash out slowly, once, twice a week, and just keep running it up, running it up, running it up, running it up, running it up. Super Bowl comes. And here's another moment from like my sports betting career so far that I actually remembered yesterday was I think it might have been the 2021 Super Bowl. I remember seeing the handle got posted either in the newspaper or I saw it on Twitter or something. The Super Bowl handle was posted, and I looked at it and I was like, wow, how much did I bet on this Super Bowl? And I went through and just checked all my stuff, and like I had 25% of the entire handle for the whole state of New Hampshire on that Super Bowl, which is fucking bananas. Like that was bananas to me at the time, and still looking back on it now, like, I mean, it's not too crazy, but that's like one of those moments where you're like, Jesus, man, like, you know, I was making subs 10 years ago in a sub shop, and now, you know, I got 25% of the fucking state's handle on, you know, the biggest game in the world. That was pretty cool. But anyhow, I had a great Super Bowl that year. And then the next thing that happened with me was Draftkings changed their software and all their kiosks in there. So I'm sitting on all these tickets from the prior kiosks, which aren't compatible with the new kiosks. So they had kiosks in there that were branded Draftkings. Odds were powered by Canby. Now they put in all new kiosks, but they did have a kiosk at the front where you could cash in your old tickets. Now, so I just played the long game, cashed them in slow. They never got my ID because I just wanted to stay anonymous with them. So now comes the fall, and all of a sudden, these kiosks are in there. Now, I went in there the first couple of weeks, I think, and I think I stayed under the radar. I can't remember exactly, but this is what got me banned in there. Now, I went in there, must have been September 16th, 2021, which I believe was a Wednesday. And when I think I was driving in there to bet that day, and I got a text from somebody in my network that said, hey, they have this guy listed, Arthur Sitkowski. They have this guy listed for Illinois, and he's not starting. And I'm like, okay. So in the college football world, that used to be very common. Now, I can't think of an instance of that that's happened in years now, where they list a guy that's not going to start. And so the word got out that this guy wasn't going to start. But so how it started that year was week 1, Brandon Peters started, got hurt. And Sitkowski, I think, came in for him. And then Sitkowski played week 2, and then this was week 3. So this edge is something early in my sports betting career that is something you would take advantage of. If you knew a player was listed on the board, but they weren't starting, you just bet as much as you could. But the thing is, before I had Draftkings, like, you're limited to how much you can bet with how many bookies you have or how many offshores you have. You couldn't get down you just couldn't. It was harder to get down a lot of money unless you were one of these huge syndicates. And if you were one of these huge syndicates, like, I don't know, like, are you really going to take a shot on a play like that? I mean, some huge syndicates will, some won't. But for me, that was one of my bread and butter plays. That's like almost like the Dylan Raiola play that I went over last week. I find a spot where I think I have a massive edge, and I'm going to exploit it. That's just how it is. So I went in there and actually stopped. I think I stopped. I stopped at the bank, grabbed a bunch of cash, and I went in there with like 50 or 60,000, and I went to the machine, and I put some other bets in, and then I'm just saying to myself, like, how hard am I going to go on Artur Sikowski here? I just need the guy to get in for one snap. He played pretty well the prior 2 weeks, and how hard am I going to go? And I started stuffing and stuffing and stuffing and stuffing and stuffing and stuffing. And then finally, I got to a certain point. I'm like, is that enough? And I'm like, no, fuck this. I'm giving them all of it. So I went out to my car. I think I went into my trunk, grabbed the rest of the money, came back in, and I just started feeding this machine money. And I don't remember exactly how much it was, but it was somewhere around 50 or 60K. And in my mind, I just need this guy to get in for one snap, and I collect the money. Now, some people are going to say, this is probably the dumbest thing ever. They're just going to avoid all the tickets, okay? Now, the thing is, on one hand, that probably was true in this scenario, but there were scenarios in the prior year on the old kiosks, which I had experience with, where I could go in there an hour before a game, and those limits I was talking about before that were on the kiosks, where you could only bet X amount before you couldn't bet anymore. Sometimes an hour before an NBA or an NHL game, I could go in there and put $20,000 worth of vouchers in a machine, and they would just keep spitting tickets out over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Like, I've written about these before, but like LeBron James, like, he would have, a scenario where he's getting a triple-double, maybe one in every 15 games, but an hour before tip-off, I'm getting minus 150 on no triple-double. And I just stacked the machine, and luckily I never lost any of those. There was another one that was like Devin Booker. He had like 2 double-doubles that year, and I would bet no double-double at like minus 600, and I would just stack on it. And another one was Jokic. He had like, you could bet like minus 200 that he would get a double-double. Like, and we're talking about, the guy's a walking triple-double machine. I think that was the first real coming out year for him, where he was getting double-doubles and some triple-doubles, whatever. But, I'm laying like 2-1 on something that's happening like at a far greater rate than that. And I'm just printing. I was getting hockey players that were, maybe, let's just, for an example, a guy has 1 goal in 40 games, and I'm laying like minus 600, no goal. Like, that's just insane. Like, again, this is going back to like the whole modeling stuff and all that. You don't need to be you don't have to have the most perfect system to know this stuff. You just need to know, okay, he gets a triple-double once in every 15 games. All right, I'm betting no, minus 150. Okay, that's it. Same thing with the hockey. 1 goal, 40 games. I'm going to bet no, minus 600. Two double-doubles in 80 games. I'm just going to bet no. You don't need perfect information. That's all the information you need, and then you just stack it. So I did that for a long time, and it was really a benefit to growing my bankroll, because there was they didn't detect it, or they didn't care. They just let those bets go through an hour before the game. The kiosks were open like a floodgate in certain scenarios. Same thing around the national championship and the Super Bowl. Sometimes you'd go in there, and I think the big reason why they would do it in these instances is because an hour before the game, they don't want lines forming at the front of the counter on certain bets that people can't play. So they'll just open the kiosks and let you go, because they don't want a line of 50 people saying, hey, I'm trying to bet this on the kiosk, but I can't, especially the Super Bowl. These places are mobbed. People want to bet on this stuff, and they can't just cap it like that. They can't just cap the bets in those scenarios because the lines will just get too long and then people get shut out and people get pissed off. So, I figured that out. So, whatever. Now I'm in here this day and I just jammed this machine, all nose, no under passing yards, under passing TDs, under passing yards, under passing TDs. Now, the question you're probably asking yourself, like, did he win this bet? Or did I sweat the bet is another thing. And I didn't even sweat this bet. I might have sweat the first quarter. The guy Peters started. I needed Sitkowski to get in the game. And actually I went to bed early that night. Woke up the next day, I think, and or maybe I woke up at later that night. I'd slept for a few hours and with some messages on how the game played out. And Guy Peters went 10 for 26. Okay, it was a 20-17 win for Maryland. It was Maryland versus Illinois. And at the end of this game, so this guy's 10 for 26. Do you know how close he probably was to getting benched? From what I remember, from what I was told from my friends who knew I had these bets, and they might have had these bets too because they fed me the information. Obviously, they had something on it, but they told me that Sitkowski was warming up on the sideline because Brandon Peters was so brutal in this game that if it went to overtime, that Sitkowski was coming in, then I win all the tickets. And so anyhow, Maryland kicks a field goal, game ends, my guy doesn't get in. I go back the next day to put more bets in. I go to the kiosk and I get surrounded. Literally, I robbed a bank. 3 guys came down and they're surround me and they're like, hey, we need to see your ID. I'm like, what for? Who are you? Whatever. I knew who they were. I knew who these guys were, but why do you need to see my ID? They're just like, you came in yesterday and, you placed a ton of bets, blah, blah, blah. And, we have AML requirements, blah, blah, blah. We need to see your ID. And I told them I didn't have my ID. So I don't have my ID with me. I don't have it. They're like, all right, well, you're free to continue. We see you in here sometimes. You're free to continue betting today. And, but we need to see your ID when you come back tomorrow. I was like, all right, fine. So I went outside. I called a friend of mine and I said, hey, I'm new to this, new to kiosk betting and stuff. Should I just give them the ID? And he's like, no, don't give them the ID. He's like, you just don't give them the ID. He's like, you're still live on the app, right? And I said, yeah. And at this time, I'm in the middle of a run of a plus 250K on the app. So I did not want to, I was like, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't give them the ID. I said, they said I can continue betting today. He goes, don't go back in. Just leave. And I'm like, you know what? Well, the tickets are going to stand. The tickets are going to be good. So I'm just going to go back in and continue betting. And then at least I'll just get more volume in. They have to pay the tickets no matter what. Whenever I decide to cash them in, I have a year to cash them in. I wasn't in desperate need of the money or anything. So it didn't matter to me whether I was getting the money the next day or in a year. It didn't factor into anything I was doing at the time. So I go back in, start betting again, and they come back down and they're like, hey, sorry, we changed our mind. We need your ID. I'm like, well, I don't have it with me. So they're like, all right, we'll just come back tomorrow. So I had left there and I just continued betting on the app until I was banned. And when I got banned, I don't know, sometime late that fall, I went back there sometime around Christmas or New Year's. And when I walked in there, the guy thought he saw a ghost or something. He's just staring and just watched me walk up to the counter. And, I walk up to the counter and he's just like, yeah, can I help you? And I'm like, yeah, I have a bunch of tickets I need to cash out. He's like, well, I can't do it. This guy has to come in. They're all locked up. I'm like, call this guy. So I had to call some guy. And I don't remember how long it took, but it at least a few days. It might have even taken it took at least a few days for this guy to get in there, which is like pretty shitty considering, we're talking about Draftkings here. Like someone should have been able to do it that day. So I show up when they say to go in there, and I go in, and the guy's like, we didn't think you were coming back. And the casino owner was in the meeting too. And he's like, we didn't think you were coming in here. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, we thought you were like money laundering or something. Like, he's like, what was your angle? I'm like, are you fucking serious? What was my angle? I bet on a fucking backup quarterback to get one snap in the game. That's pretty much it. I had a big edge and I bet it. That's it. So, they're like, yeah, we thought for sure that you were just going to eat this money and you were part of like some crime syndicate or I don't know, something like that. They said that in like not so many ways. And they're like, yeah, what do you do for a living anyways? And I'm just like, oh, I'm a professional poker player, whatever. And, like some years I make money, some years I don't. And they're just like, oh yeah, whatever. I'm like, so, so they paid me out. I'm like, well, what's my status here? And they're like, well, you can come in this establishment, but you can't bet at all. I'm like, not even the counter? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, I know that's your decision, but like, what rule? Did I break any rules? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, all right, whatever. So I didn't break any rules. You don't have any signs posted on your kiosk saying that you can't bet certain amounts, but you're basically telling me I can't bet here anymore because we don't want you to. And I'm like, all right, it's fine. I know how all that works. You have the right to refuse anybody. So I just took my check, left, and I didn't go back in there. And there's a follow-up to this because I did go to another establishment about 6 months later, just to see if this carried at multiple locations. So about 6 months later, I go to this other joint, which is Seabrook, and I went in there, I put all my bets in at the counter. I wanted to see, like, how does this work? Like, they just told me I couldn't bet at that location. They said that I wasn't allowed. No, they said I was allowed on the premises. I just couldn't bet there anymore, which was fine. So I went to this other location in Seabrook, and I just went to the counter and brought a bunch of NBA props. Like, hey, what do you guys take? Like, how much do you want to bet? So, give me 5,000 a prop. Can you guys do that? And they're like, it's a lot, but let me call. They made a call, and they're like, we can do like 2,000. So they gave me like 2,000 a prop to start. And I bet there for like a week or something like that. And then in the meantime, I had called back I had been in touch with the other casino, and I'm like, well, they told me actually when I got banned, they said, it's possible that you can come back in here and bet, but you need to talk with the state regulator. And I was like, okay. So I left that kind of on the back burner for a while, and I got in touch with the state. I was in touch with the state regulator around then, or the guy that worked the head of the lottery sports betting commission or whatever. And I was like, yeah, can I get back in gambling, like in here? I want to go in there and place bets. Like, I live in the state of New Hampshire, and I don't feel I did anything wrong. So, like, what is your take on this? Like, why am I banned? Because I was told that it was a decision not by just the casino. It was joint with the state and the casino. So, this guy, I think his name was Daniel Maloney. I talked to him, and he said, no, because he's like, we don't know like where that money came from, or like we like you put a lot of money in this machine, and like it would kind of be reckless for us to let you continue gambling in there. And I said, well, and then he said to me, he goes like, well, maybe if you like could show some tax returns that like that was actually your money and this and that. And I'm like, so you're telling me if I come up with some tax returns that I'll be allowed to go back in there and gamble. And he said possibly. He didn't say yes. He said, possibly. But he made it sound like it was a good possibility to happen. So I said, okay. I said, how about, he's like, well, what do you do? I go, I'm a professional sports bettor. I came right out and said, I didn't care. None of this really, didn't really matter to me, like about the whole longevity or, how long I could take it in this new casino. It didn't matter to me. Like, this point in time, with the way that people were able to get down anywhere, not just Draftkings, anywhere. Like, you can bet anywhere. I mean, anyone can. You can get banned anywhere. You could still bet there if you really try hard enough. Or you could advise somebody on what they should be gambling. And, it's like Captain Jack said once on a podcast. I remember this pretty clearly. Well, if they throw you out the front door, you can always find a way to sneak in the window. And I'm not saying that's what I was doing there, but at that time, I was able to pretty much bet anywhere I wanted, as much as I wanted. So anyhow, this guy, he tells me, he says, he goes, you're a professional gambler. I said, yeah. So how long have you been doing that? I said, I don't know, 16, 15 years. I got 15 years of tax returns. I said, that's what you want? Then that's what I'll give you. Who do I send them to? And he's like, let me get back to you. I said, all right, fine. So he calls me back and he's like, yeah, sorry. We had a talk and you just can't gamble in there. You can't bet in there anymore. And I said, well, what happened with the whole tax return thing? And he said to me, he goes, we actually came up with a better idea. You can just bet on the app, just bet on the app. And I'm like, well, usually it doesn't work that way in most states. Usually they say, we don't want you to bet on the app. You have to come into the counter. And, I wasn't mad about any of this at all at the time. It was more like, I was just pressing, trying to, I wanted to see how they run things in this state. And, anyhow, then I said to the guy, I said, well, what about Seabrook? I said, I've been going in Seabrook betting every day. I said, so you're telling me I can't go in there, I can only bet on the app at one place. I said, well, what about Seabrook? And he said, I said, I've been going in there every day. I went to the counter. I showed them my ID. I've been betting big amounts in there. He's like, really? I said, yeah. He's like, I don't know if you should be in there. And I'm like, why not? Like, I have no history in there. Like, whatever. It's a completely different establishment run by completely different people. I mean, Draftkings powers the odds, and they split it with the casino. So he calls me back and he's like, yeah, actually, you can't bet there either. And they want to ban you from the property there. So they want to ban me from the property. I said, what did I do? I went in there and showed an ID and I was just gambling. That's all. I just bet on sports. I said, so you're telling me this all stemmed from stuffing money in a kiosk that I pay taxes on at one place, and they allow me on the property, but not to bet. But this other place where I did nothing wrong, they want to bar me from the property. And he said, yeah, I'm telling you, that's what I'm telling you. I'm like, that is absolutely fucking bananas. Like, it's one thing to restrict me and say you can't gamble, but it's another thing to say that you can't come on the property for anything. I said, well, what about poker? What if I want to play poker? They're like, no. They'd be afraid that you're going to, like, recruit people in the poker room to bet for you. I'm like, you understand that, like, if I wanted to place bets at any of these places, I could have people go in there for me or advise people what to do. Like, and this goes back to something that someone like Spanky talks about all the time. It's, wouldn't you rather know who's placing the bets than not placing the bets if you were one of these places? And I mean, I know I would, but apparently these places don't think like that. So anyhow, I go in there and I go in there to cash my tickets, and they're like, and the guy walks up to me, little nerdy guy with glasses comes out. And I'm saying nerdy with all due respect. Looked like a really smart guy. He came out and he's like, you're so lucky that you're getting paid. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I came in here, I showed an ID. Nothing in, you guys, whatever system you have didn't detect that Like, I'm supposed to be banned anywhere else. No one told me I was banned anywhere else. Like, as far as I know, I could go into any of these places and bet, except for the one where they told me they didn't want my action. And he's like, yeah, okay, you're just really lucky, pal. Really lucky. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. So they paid me out, and like that there in itself shows like the entitlement that these people have, that they feel like it's their money, and it's not their money, like whatever. And that right there is like the guy's trying to fucking intimidate me, and it's like, I didn't do anything wrong. All I did was come in here and place bets. I gave an ID, and that's that. You don't want my action, then just say no, but don't tell me I'm lucky I'm getting paid. So that was that. That was my tenure at Draftkings betting in the state of New Hampshire. Whatever. I feel like I didn't do anything wrong. I feel like if they don't want my business, that's fine. And some people be like, yeah, it was because you took a shot at them, and it 100% wasn't because I took a shot at them. They didn't even know that I was taking a shot at them. Which leads me to another thing. Like, somebody might say, yeah, you were taking a shot at them there, like if that guy got in, like that's another thing. Would they have free rolled me if that play had won? I don't know. Maybe they would have. I mean, the next story I'm about to tell you will probably lead you to think that they would have free rolled me there, because I know a guy that they did free roll 100%. So anyhow, I got those tickets, the voided tickets, got the money. And let's move on to I'm going to do this next story about somebody who grew up in my hometown that had some problems in there. And then I'm going to get to a Q&A to end this. We're coming up on an hour now, so I don't know how much longer I'm going to go with this. But so this guy was in there betting sometime around the same time I was, and he went in and he was jamming kiosks I think he was at the Manchester location, jamming the kiosks, and they came out, they detected him, and they just said, hey, we want you to come bet at the counter for your own protection. If you lose these tickets, like, we have them all recorded. And, they never told him he couldn't bet the kiosks. They just said, we want you to come to our counter, and we want you to bet at our counter. We're going to give you perks, this, that. And, it's going to be for your protection, and, it'll help us with our AML stuff. And that's another thing. This AML shit, it's all bullshit. They try and place the AML restrictions, like, on you when it's their job to enforce. Like, so, and nothing on their kiosks say anything about AML or any of that. They don't have rules about repetitive bets. At least they didn't back then. So this guy started going to the counter, and he started winning. He was winning big. He was betting props, and I think he ran it up pretty good against them. And then they kept limiting him to 500, 250, whatever. And so he started going to other locations, and at these other locations, he would kiosk jam at those locations. Now, they keep in mind, at this first location, they never told this guy that he couldn't bet at the kiosks at this location. They just said, we want you to come to the counter for your own protection. It's going to help you, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, he gave them action at the counter, but he continued to hit their kiosks. And he hit their kiosk. He hit the kiosk there. And then at this time, there's 3 locations around the state. So he would go from location to location to location. And he would just hit all the kiosks over and over repetitively. And at the Seabrook location, I think they told him, you can't bet the kiosks anymore, only counter. So he knew that. So he would bet the counter, and I think ultimately he would hit the kiosk sometimes when he thought he could get away with it. And that's how he got banned from the Seabrook location. Now, I think what happened there was, he was hitting the kiosks. They told him, I'll get to that in a minute. I'll tie that in a minute. Anyhow, he started going to this bowling alley on, I think it's the east side of New Hampshire. And he was betting in there. A lot of the same employees in there from the Manchester location, where they greeted him, got him to the counter, were giving him perks, giving him all kinds of meals, whatever. And, he was betting at this other location for months, just jamming the kiosks. He would get tickets eaten. He would go to the counter. They'd replace him, no problem. Same employees, both places, a lot of the same employees. And he even said to them, he's like, is my style of betting okay? Like, betting the same stuff over and over again, multiple kiosks. They're like, oh yeah, you're all set, buddy. Like, we've been tracking your bets for like 3 or 4 months, and you're good. Like, you're good. You can basically, bet like that. We've been tracking you. It's no problem here. And then one day he goes on a 16-1 run on like a Monday night or something like that. He went on a 16-1 run. I think he was betting NBA player props, if I remember correctly. But he went 15-0 that Monday night. And then, of course, what do you think they did? They froze all the tickets. After tracking his wagers and watching what he's doing for 3 or 4 months, they waited till he went 15-0. And then they freeze all the tickets. Now, he went to the counter to cash them in, and I think they said, the manager, Tony, you got to call him. And I know all this because he sent me all the filings here from everything that happened with this whole thing after I made this post about the other kid with the 150K wins this past week. So anyways, he calls the manager. Manager tells him, you were instructed that you could not bet the kiosks at one location or this location. Now keep in mind, both locations don't even have the same brand name. It's not like you're betting at a Caesars and a Caesars. One place is called Filatimo Casino. Another place is called Dover Bowl. But Filatimo owns both places. Now, he'd asked the employees and the managers in there, like, is it okay the way I'm betting? They told him, yeah. So now this guy's telling him, no, you were specifically told that you could not bet at either location. You couldn't bet kiosks at either location. And he said, that's bullshit. That's never happened. He's like, if you could you guys have state-of-the-art security, just pull it up, and it's that easy. And just show it to me, and that's it. This whole thing will go away, and I'll take my L. But they couldn't pull that up because they apparently never told him that. They just made that up on the fly to steal all the money that they stole from him when he went 15-0. And I think he had a couple pending bets or something the next day, went 1-1. And he was never able to find out. He was never able to find out what time they voided the bets. But I'm pretty sure it wasn't done until the next day. So they knew the results of the game. They voided all the bets. And then, of course, you're going to say, well, okay, you just appeal. So he did appeal. And he wound up losing the appeal. And I'm going to go into these notations. There's like 8 notations here. So this is what they wrote back to him, the key findings of the investigations are. And then I'm going to get to his banning at the other casino and how they handled that and how they free-rolled him there, which they also free-rolled him here. I'm sure if he went 0-16, those tickets wouldn't have gotten frozen. They would have just left them. That's just a hunch. That's just the way these places do business. So they wrote, key findings of this investigation. Draftkings made the house rules readily available for review at each location in compliance with Lot 2002.2. That's 100% false. I know this because I bet at all these locations, and house rules were never readily available at any of these locations. In fact, the guy who took up the investigation, when he appealed, they assigned an investigator to it who had to investigate this whole thing from top to bottom. That guy even told my friend in this meeting that there were no house rules available anywhere. They weren't on the kiosks. You couldn't click anywhere on the kiosks. He went to the counter and asked them, and they didn't have any. There's no house rules available anywhere. So that's a lie. And this is the ruling that comes down from the state, or from the State Lottery Commission. So that's a lie right there. Number two, it says Mr. So-and-so had a betting system where he placed identical wagers at kiosks that aggregated to a total wager in far excess of kiosk limits and AML reporting requirements. This is another big L, and you know, these people, for better terms, can go fuck themselves when they say shit like this. Like, there is nothing on these kiosks that say that you cannot bet the same bet multiple times. I know since then, that's been added at some of these locations on the kiosks. They'll put something that says, you can't bet X, Y, and Z so many times. If you do, we have the right to void them. That's one thing. None of these kiosks said anything like that. And if my neighbor Tom went in there and he bet an NBA game 5 minutes to tip, and he bet the Celtics 15 times on the money line, they're not voiding those. They're just going to let them go. So they pick and choose when they're going to do this stuff. The other thing why I'm saying they can go fuck themselves about this is the AML reporting requirements. Okay. It shouldn't be the bettors. It's not the bettors' problem to be responsible for AML reporting requirements. That's the state's job, not the bet. That has nothing to do with the bettor. And let's see what else they wrote here. Pursuant to House rules, Draftkings may void identical wagers. 100% false. It didn't say that anywhere on any of the kiosks or at the front. Their investigator found that. Now, I think they did send a link to him, but it was on the app. So, like, again, what the fuck does the app have to do with the kiosks? If it's not on the kiosks or in the location, who gives a shit about what the app says? You're not betting on the app. You're betting in a fucking physical location. So, let's see here. Patrons are prohibited from wagering more than $2,999 on kiosks to ensure a proper AML recording. Another thing, that's fucking bullshit right there. I've gone in there, like I said, 30 minutes before tip and jammed in, 20,000 on LeBron, no triple double, no problem. Boom, spitting them right out over and over and over. And again, it shouldn't be the customer's job to ensure proper AML recording. And there's no signs on any of these kiosks that say anything about that. The only thing that you notice is you can't put more than $29.99 into each kiosk per time. It doesn't say you can't do that multiple times. In fact, like, I've been in these places at 1, 2 in the morning, and you have some guy come in there off the streets with 30,000 just jamming bets in, no problem. They have no problem taking bets from those guys. So then it says here, Mr. So-and-so was informed that his betting pattern did not comply with house rules and reporting requirements, and that these rules applied at all Draftkings locations. Again, total bullshit. He had talked that he had never been told at one location that he couldn't bet the kiosks. They just wanted him to come to the counter for his own benefit, to do whatever, so they can wine and dine him if he was a fish. And then, if he shows he's sharp, they limit him, which they wound up doing. Again, he tried to get them to pull up the recordings of them saying that you weren't allowed to jam these kiosks. Never came up. Let's see what else here. And that these rules applied at all Draftkings locations. Now, that's another thing. Total bullshit. Like, I've already gone through the kid that hit the 150K parlay. I've gone through mine, and now this one. Neither of any of the three of us were told that you can't bet whatever style at specific locations. So that's another hole right there in their thing. And it says here, Mr. So-and-so continued to bet in a manner that was contradictory to house rules and did so to avoid being limited and took steps to avoid detection. Well, yeah, of course he was trying to avoid detection, but like, again, one of these locations told him, we know exactly what you're doing and it's totally fine. So they advised him that he could do that. And, and contradictory to house rules. Again, every one of these house rules that we just went over was total bullshit. None of those are house rules. They might be now, but in 2021, 2022, none of these existed. And let's see here. Mr. So-and-so's activity was detected, and Draftkings, in consultation with the lottery, decided to void the wagers as permitted by house rules. And I'm going to get to that in a second, how the corruption within the state works with the State Lottery of New Hampshire and Draftkings. The investigation revealed no evidence that Draftkings only enforced the rules when it was advantageous to the house, which is another thing that's bullshit. So those are the 8 findings they had. We'll go back to 7 here. The New Hampshire Lottery decided to void the wagers permitted by Draftkings house rules. So, let me see here. So, the investigation revealed no evidence that Draftkings only enforced the rules when it was advantageous to the house. Now that, total bullshit, because the other location, the middle location that I kind of left out in the middle of the story that I spoke on quickly, the state, that location knew he was betting the kiosks, and they contacted the state or the state lottery. And the state lottery said, void all the tickets. Now, in this instance, they didn't void the tickets. His tickets went like 1-7. And he lost a shitload of money. And that location just said, hey, no, we're not voiding the tickets. Like, we'll leave them as is, and we'll ban this guy. And they banned him from that location. But they didn't void the tickets. So they pick and choose how they want to do things based on what's best for them. So, one place, they void the tickets because of AML, this and that, and all the other things. And then the other place, it's the same situation, but they let the tickets stand and they don't void them. So they certainly do pick and choose when it's advantageous to the house to enforce the rules. Now, going back on this, when Draftkings and when they banned Mr. So-and-so, he told me he called them that day and he talked to a guy at the state. And the guy at the state basically told him, you broke all these rules, blah, blah, blah. That's why we voided the tickets. You know what you were doing. What you did was wrong, blah, 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 blah. And why they voided the tickets. Now, the problem is that guy was in conjunction with Draftkings in the casino to void the tickets. He was part of the decision to ban the tickets. The state lottery was part of the team that decided to void his tickets. The problem is the guy that investigates this whole case forms a huge file which basically contradicted all of this stuff right here. That's all these 8 points right here. And everything contradicts this. The guy that makes the ruling is the guy that he talked to on the phone from the state lottery. That's the guy whose name's listed right here, John Conforti. So this guy gets a part in the decision to void the tickets. Then he also gets to review all this evidence, and he gets to make the decision that the decision stands. So how does that work? With me talking to the state multiple times about this and their practices and procedures, talking with Daniel Maloney, I always got the biggest bullshit responses from him. Oh, well, we're not Vegas. We're new to this. So, we work hand in hand. Well, you want to know what? Maybe you should go to Vegas and see how they're doing things and try and replicate that, because at least there, it's somewhat of a fair process. All these tickets would just stand. The ticket prints, the ticket stands. Instead, you have situations like this where corrupt shit happens, where you just pick and choose what you want to do based on all these bullshit rules that. And this guy told me when he was in a meeting with the state investigator that the state investigator said, like, this is a slam dunk, this is a home run, like you're gonna win this easily, like, this is looking. He didn't put it in those words, but he said this is looking really good. Like, none of this stuff matches up with any of this. Like, all this stuff that I just read to you, all these 8 points, it's all made up. And they just picked and chose whatever. And then they threw something on the app later. I think they threw that on the app after this case. And even if it was there, it doesn't matter. You're not betting on the app. You're betting in the location. So anyhow, now you're probably wondering, like, with all these holes here, how do you, this is easy. And people have said this, like, with a situation like this, you could contact a gaming attorney and you could easily fight them in court and win this. Well, he did tell me he talked to multiple gaming attorneys, and multiple gaming attorneys told him that it's going to cost him, I think he had like 30 or 40,000 in profit, that it was going to cost him 30 or 40,000 dollars. And then if he lost, he was going to have to take all the time, do all the filing, and he would need to find a competent gaming attorney, which probably really doesn't exist in this area because gambling is kind of new up here. And so I don't know how good of a gaming attorney he was going to get here. But, it's going to cost him 30 to 40K just to file the lawsuit, go to court. And then if you lose, you have to pay all the attorney fees for Draftkings, the casino, whatever. So not only are you paying your 40K, if somehow you lose, you're going to have to pay their attorney fees, which could be through the roof, depending on how many attorneys they're using. So he was advised, I believe, to just not go forward with it. But I'm just showing you that they will fuck you any chance they get. Now, some people out there are going to say, well, this guy was doing this and avoiding detecting and this and that. They don't have any rules. There are no rules. You can walk into these casinos, or at least you could at the time, and just bet whatever you wanted, on whatever you wanted. There were no rules. There's no AML posted. There was nothing that said you can only play so much. All this is all bullshit. It was wide open. It was open season for a year, or 2 years or so. And I'll get into that in another blog on the run-up I had between there and whatever, in like 2020, 2021, 2022, which I consider like the golden years for me, where I was able to, really take off with my bankroll because this stuff was new and wide open, and I was prepared for it. I was ready for it. I was a step ahead of them in terms of, capping and whatever, and their odds were just terrible at the time. So whatever, it is what it is. It's just a reminder. When places like this open, or gaming opens where you are, some people, there's different approaches. My approach was, strike first, strike hard, no mercy. Just get as much as you can. Some people don't use that strategy, and they want to go slow, see what happens, and that works in some cases. But in my case, with my specific scenario, I wanted to get in as much as I could, and that just, it gives you more money to live to fight another day when you go through those bad runs. So anyhow, that's it with that case. In all three of those cases, I don't know, a little long-winded there. Hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you didn't. Maybe it was boring to some people, but I felt like it's good to get that out there, because states like New Hampshire that have no fucking clue what they're doing, or states that are new to this stuff, they will fuck you over when they can, and they'll pick and choose the rules when they can, because that's just what they can do, because there's no oversight. They are the oversight with the casinos. They're in bed with each other, and it's probably the same way in other states. But again, if something like this happened in a regulated state like Vegas, all these tickets stand, and they just kick you out. So I don't know. Maybe they should take some notes and adopt those policies. Anyhow. Moving on, Q&A, and then I'm going to end this. We're on an hour and 20 minutes now. This is it's going on a little longer than I wanted, but whatever. Here we go. First Q&A here. There's another horror story, actually. Somebody messaged me. He says, I'm not going to say the location, but $100,000 in college basketball props he won at one of these locations. Not in New Hampshire. It was at another Draftkings location. And they tried the shady shit with the repeat kiosk tickets, and that was not in their terms of service at the time, he says. He didn't get back to me on whether they paid, whether he had to go through something, but I'm sure that they gave him a lot of shit about this. Hopefully he got paid, though. There's another one here. This guy's a professional tennis gambler who, let's see here. Some people will probably know who this is, but this guy says $22K. He won $22K betting at a Draftkings location on tennis. They froze all the tickets. He went in there and tried to cash his tickets. And they accused him of quote unquote, wait till you hear this, working with someone on the inside. He contacted a lawyer. The lawyer said, it's not really life-changing money, kind of the same as my buddy's scenario. And, they referred him to the regulator, and they said they couldn't finish it until the investigation was over. Well, 11 months went by. No one he couldn't get in touch with anyone. No one contacted him. And finally, he told them that he was going to expose the whole story like he did nothing wrong. And within a day, they paid him out. So this goes to show you, they just pick and choose what they want to do. And they'll fuck you over when they can. And it's good that he went back at them, but there's other people out there that won't follow through with this stuff. Maybe because of self-esteem issues or this or that. Some people are have social anxiety and they don't want to deal with this stuff, and they'll just walk away. But that story will probably come out at some point very soon. I'm pretty sure he's going to write an article on that, and it should get some traction. And let me see what else here. Our father had a question here. Let's see. Always at kiosk or counter two? How much were you pumping into a kiosk in a session? Okay, I'll take these one by one. So for me, it was mainly kiosks. But if I felt I had a pretty big edge on something, I would go to the counter and I would place a bet. But I would never place a bet large enough that would put me over the threshold where they could ID me. And the reason why I didn't want them to ID me was because they would build a profile on me. They would realize I'm sharp, and then they would kick me out. So, for example, 2021 Alabama national championship game, I think it was, Mac Jones. I would go to the counter, and I would bet, $1,700 to win $2,900 on Mac Jones under rushing yards, and I would just do that at the locations over and over and over and again. And whatever, that's it. I would only bet the counters in specific scenarios where I knew I had huge edges, where they couldn't build a profile on me. I would never have the bet go over whatever their threshold is to trigger an ID, because once they trigger your ID, they profile you and then they kick you out, and the goal is longevity. So yeah, that's what I did there. How much was I pumping into kiosks in a session? How much they allow per player prop? Again, it's just random. I pump in as much as I could. And I would just try and extract as much value out of these as I could, because I knew it wasn't going to last forever. How much do they allow per prop? Again, when I was betting then, per player prop, you're getting 300, and then you get to rebet. And then maybe one more rebet, and then you can't bet at that location unless you go to the counter. And then I wouldn't go to the counter. I would just go to the other location, and I would just bet, rebet. But if it was a big game, like a national title game, and I really liked something, sometimes they would let me bet it 40 times for 300, and they would just let it go through. So it all depends. It's like a cat and mouse game at any location, at any casino you go to. You need to go in, find out what you can get away with, where the vulnerabilities are, and just do the best you can to not get detected if that's what your goal is. Let me see here. Are you hitting the same prop over and over? I was then. Like some people, now you can't do that at any of these locations. I think if the same player is bet multiple times within 20 minutes, they'll just trigger a void on the tickets or something like that, or they'll start an investigation. They're pretty ruthless with this stuff now about rebets, at least at the Draftkings locations I can speak of. But, there's other casinos where you can find vulnerabilities where you can just bet and bet and bet and bet and bet and bet. And sometimes, I think I mentioned this last week on the last podcast I did, you could find, we found where if we bet rushing props, we could bet as much as we wanted, as many times as we wanted. Line would never move. Something was wrong with their system, and we just took advantage of it. We wound up lopsided on whatever. But again, we don't care if we're lopsided on rushing props because, in my opinion, they're the most profitable props because running backs probably get hurt more than any other position. And there's a multitude of other reasons I'm not going to get into. But let me see. How long did it take them to give you the boot? I went over that already. Whatever you feel comfortable. All right, so that's it. I feel like I answered those questions pretty good. Couple more here. Let me see here. All right, this guy. Oculus Cellular 670. Let me see here. Why don't you bet a lot of NBA, NHL, MLB props? Now, very simple. I don't have the time. Mainly college football. I'll probably start doing some NFL soon because college football is dying down. But I don't have the brain power or the time to just do both sports on a weekly basis, keep up with all the news, and be efficient. So NBA stuff, I work with originators that will do that, not do it for me, but maybe we have a mutual partnership. Maybe I can bet, maybe they like to originate, Maybe I work with some top-down guys that want to get down and I can get down for them or whatever. If they, it's all about finding guys that you fit with and, those markets, I have people that maybe specialize in those markets. And, if we can help each other in other ways, then that's what we do. And it's a lot of workload when you're manually doing this stuff. Even if you weren't manually doing it, just going in, finding all the, if you had even a cheat sheet to get all the answers to all these props, I'm 47 now, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. It takes a lot of work just to get it all in, get it all down, track it all. It's a lot of work. Let me see. Do you think the market is too efficient? So time best spent elsewhere? Something else you just haven't gotten in? Yeah, that's relating to that question. Those markets have gotten efficient, as have the football prop markets, 100%. But I just don't want to spend my time doing that. I mean, once football ends, I want the most passive 6 months or so between football. So I have a nice spring, nice summer when the weather's nice here. Spend a lot of time with my kid. And then just try and have things kind of automated where I'm still getting a lot of action in, but I'm not doing a lot of the work. Let's see here. Now I'm just going to go to this thread, bunch of questions, and then I'll wrap this thing up. We're going on 90 minutes now. Wow. How do you strategize taking profits to live life versus growing the bankroll? It's a good question. Because the most important thing is growing the bankroll, but you have to live life as well. So, I didn't really strategize much when I didn't have a lot of money. I was still clipping coupons when I'm making $30,000 a year. Not clipping coupons. Go to get an oil change. I go online and find the coupon. Go into a Costco or something, or a store like that. Cutting the coupons, looking at the coupons, trying to find the best cell phone providers for the cheapest amount of money. Driving used cars, which is all fine, but that's the type of stuff that I did to to keep my bankroll as good as it could while, I was running it up. Some of that stuff I've cut back a lot on because it's probably more of a waste that I could just make more money spending my time doing other things. But it's just kind of a balance, like when you're struggling and you're coming up, you just can't live life lavishly or you're just going to bust out. And I've never been a big spender in buying expensive clothes, expensive items. I've probably worn this sweatshirt on every podcast that I've done, just because it's comfortable. Let's see. Is there a number, say $1 million, where you cease to grow your bankroll and focus on spending your profits? Or do you live consistently below your means in case of bad variance and the chance of higher profits? I kind of get into that. I mean, I've always kind of lived below my means and never really went overboard. I don't place like a lot of degen bets and stuff like that that's going to put me in bad scenarios. And I've kind of gotten to a point now where like I could run as bad as I could run pretty bad and still be, pretty comfortable, just because the type of stuff that I feel that I'm betting on, the edges that I feel that I have, it's going to be hard for all the dominoes to fall at the same time. It's like something like the Super Bowl bet. If you have 300 Super Bowl bets in that are all plus EV, there's a good chance you're going to hit a lot of those bets. And if you run bad, there's a good chance you're not going to get smoked anyways. So, but there's, I don't know, as far as like a number, like say 1 million, where you cease to grow your bankroll and focus on spending, like I would more say, and this is actually some advice on something else. It's like, you should always be focusing on growing your bankroll, no matter what. But I feel that when you have like a 30K, 50K, 100K, even like 200K bankroll, if you find spots, then you should pile it in and take some heavy risks to try and just go from here to here fast. I don't know. That's just the way I think. I mean, most people that I know in poker and sports too, they got to where they got to because they took some risks on some type of event or something, or they took shots in a big poker game that maybe they were kind of under bankrolled for. But sometimes if you don't take those shots, you only take those shots though if it's easy to rebuild. Let me see. Did you get any cool gifts with Onyx status at Draftkings? Now, I think that Onyx was the Draftkings thing, and I think I got that right around the time I got banned. So I don't know. They put me on Onyx status. I was like, woo-wee, yeah, this is great. I was running it up on the app, and they started promising me all this stuff. I had, guys texting me, we can do this and that, and then all of a sudden it was all gone. And again, I don't care. I know I'm going to get kicked out of wherever it is unless it's a sharp book betting me. I'm going to get kicked out everywhere, I bet. And no harm, no foul. I don't care. That's fine. They can do whatever they want. I just don't like the way that they handle things in this state. Part of it might be because of inexperience, but again, it's looking back at them, looking at this sheet again, it's pretty bullshit what they did to this guy. Let's see here. Let's say it's the 6th week of college football. You acquire a new Draftkings account. Do you just slam as many bets as possible or play the long game for account health? I mean, I'm not really betting on any of these legal apps right now, and I know they're very profitable. Some people say some of these accounts are worth up to 100K if you finesse them right. So if I was going to get into that type of thing, I would probably finesse them and then slam in some stuff as I could. But it seems like the best way to deal with these is some type of live betting maybe, or same game parlays. I don't know. I'm not really doing that right now, so I can't give you a great answer on that. And again, like, I'm not an expert at all at everything, so I'm not going to claim like I am, but I'll just give you my opinions as I go here. But yeah, I would probably figure out how to, if I was going to go down that market, I would figure out how to finesse it a little bit and try to extract as much value as I could out of it, make it look like I'm a fish, and then, slam them over the head with some stuff when they gave me some big limits. Or maybe drag it out. I'm sure there's guys out there that can drag those out a lot longer. What's the best way for someone with a small bankroll to get traction? It's hard to not chase parlay payouts when the bankroll growth is so minimal. All right, well, never chase the parlay payouts. The only way of chasing the parlay payouts is if you know that you have some type of massive edge and it's very plus EV, then you play those parlays. Otherwise, you just got to grind along. Just grind, and then all of a sudden, the Mike Tyson, Jake Paul fight comes. If I was someone with a small bankroll there, I might take a shot at that and put a lot of money on Jake Paul. Something like that, or some kind of edge you find in the market. There's just got to be a point where, you could start with a $10 bankroll and run it up to infinity, as long as you can keep getting in positive bets and you don't spend your bankroll. But realistically, at some point, you're going to have to take a shot on something to get to a certain level, or you're just not going to get to that level. Sorry for clicking the pen. I think I've clicked this a few times. Said I wasn't going to do it. Other question. They post limits on sides before you wager at a kiosk. They don't. Well, actually, do they post limits on sides before you wager at a kiosk? Some of them do. Most kiosks, it's 3K. Or they have like a 10K max payout, like on parlays or whatever. But typically, you can only get 3K into a kiosk. Maybe they'll only let you get so much. I don't know. I'm not like really in there jamming kiosks anymore. The people that I know that do go in there, some of these, some of them will take a lot, some of them won't. So some of them are limited, some of them aren't. If I had access to a Draftkings account with 10K limits on props and basically unlimited on sides, would you use any cover or just make the bets you want? It depends. Like, obviously, if I didn't know if I knew they were going to give me some longevity just betting the props, I'd bet them. But otherwise, I wouldn't bet the props. I would probably just bet a lot of sides and totals. I can get that information and get that into those accounts if I really needed to. If I to attack like sides totals, sure. Maybe sprinkle a prop in here and there, or if I felt like the heat was getting on, maybe turn up a day of props where I send 60 props in before I get the hammer. I don't know. It's a cat and mouse game, and it's like that with every account. With per head bookies, offshore, it doesn't matter. My rule of thumb was always strike first, strike hard, no mercy, and it is that in a lot of cases. But there's some cases where you do benefit from betting sides, totals, etc. And I got a lot of stories that I'll probably cover in some of these podcasts about scenarios that have come up just like that, where I don't want to bet sides and totals, but sometimes you have to. Sometimes to take a little, you got to give a little. My Draftkings had great kiosk limits till November 23. I get 3K college lacrosse, 2K FCS, 2K props. Now it's 500. Much lower than that on props. Is that countrywide? Or there's still some great locations. Again, I don't know. I don't think they're like that around here. I think, and they're quick to flag. So, like I said, that was November 23. You're probably lucky that it went that long, because they're pretty quick at lowering limits in a lot of these locations. And that's why I said before, you have to strike hard when the iron's hot. You have to strike. And if you don't strike, then you just lose out and you just get stuck spinning your wheels. What bet to win sizing is most efficient to avoid detection, but also maximize amount won? Again, it's just a game of cat and mouse. You just got to figure it out. It really depends. I've dealt with bookies that will just take all the props over and over and just get hit off the head for weeks, months, some a couple of years. Some of them will make you want to bet a certain amount of sides and totals. Some say 50-50. If you're going to put in 50%, you're going to put in 50 props, I want 50 sides and totals. So some guys might just say, hey, I want some more. So you got to figure it out. You just got to figure out what the distribution is to stay alive and bet whatever you're betting on. Let's see here. And again, there probably are some great locations out there in some spots, but you got to go out and do the legwork and find them. Let's see. Do these big companies actually limit bettors? Yes, they do. I just went over all that. Yeah, they limit you. They only want to make money off you. So just remember that. If you learn to win, they're going to kick you out. So keep that in mind when you're going into these places. When you learn to win, they will boot you. Happened with a guy brought me a bunch of per head accounts a few weeks ago, crushed them, and then they told him, he got a message saying, what's with all the, and we didn't crush him for a huge amount, but relative to the account, we crushed him pretty good. And the guy's just like, hey, where did you're betting $300 a play now? And he's like, yeah, I'm just trying something new, that's all. And the guy cut him off, and he was kind of shocked. He's like, I've paid this guy for years. I show that I can win, he cuts me off. But that's just the way the system works. So they will limit you unless you're playing at Circus Sports or Bet Chris, Bookmaker, or Pinnacle, one of the sharp books. Play at one of the there's a few others. If you're playing at sharp books, maybe they use the information, they just move the line. I don't know. Maybe they bet it elsewhere. So who knows? Let me see. I see so many people saying they got limited, but then all the pro sharp guys still bet these sites. Yeah, well, when you get, like I said before, when you get kicked out the front door, you got to find a way to get back in through the window. That's it. Let's see. My guess is most guys say they got limited because it makes them seem cool, and they're just stud bettors. No, that's not it. People get limited, and then people figure out ways to bet. If this is your livelihood, you got to find ways to get bets in, and you just got to do whatever you can within the law to do what you think's right, to get more action in. So as long as it's within the law, by all means, do whatever you got to do. I would never advise breaking any laws. That's not a good thing to do. So that's about it. I'll wrap it up now. No idea again what the future of this is, but at some point it's going to go on Spotify or YouTube. For now, you're just going to have to bookmark where you were if you got to put your phone down or whatever. But I'll get that stuff up and running at some point. So that's it. See you later.